Bom dia a todos e a todas. Bem-vindos a 2021. Bem-vindos.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first webinar in the year of the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber, I would like to wish you a blessed and wonderful 2021 with all of the required caution measures and with a vaccine for everyone. I would like to thank you for the partnership. I would like to thank the Brazilian Association of the Food Industry, here represented by Ms. Graziella Parenti, the president of the Board of Administrators at ABA, who is going to be speaking to us today. So thank you so much. I would like to thank the speakers who accepted our invitation. I would like to thank Al Qasimi from the United Arab Emirates, from Soma Mater. I would like to thank Luana Ozemela, the CEO of the Dima Consult at Qatar. I would like to thank Mr. Rafael Solimeo, the head of the International Office of the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. He's based in Dubai. And Ms. Fernanda Baltazar, the manager of international relations with our chamber, who is going to be moderating this event. But before, passing the floor to our dear guests and partners, I would like to highlight the importance of this theme. I would like to highlight the opportunities of the food industry in the Arab countries, since we truly realize the importance of the food security in the Arab countries and around the world. And now, especially with the pandemic, this topic has come to the fore, and Brazil has proven to be a reliable partner to the Arab countries, and the Arab countries have proven to be a quite faithful partner, because we've had an increase of 16% of the volume exported to the Arab countries in the year of 2020. Not only did the volume grow, but it's important to highlight how the partnerships consolidated in the year of 2020, and the partnerships will now become more stable and they will grow stronger. These are strategic partnerships with the Arab countries, with the Brazilian government, and with the Arab governments. We are looking forward, analyzing joint methods of work to improve the access to food items with the reduction of costs and with more agility in the shipment. We have now been working and planning to check the possibility of implementing direct maritime transportation lines. We have been working on digitizing this entire process to earn more time and to reduce the costs. And we have been working in developing supplementary services, because this is so much important for Brazil and for the Arab countries. Brazil really needs the Arab countries to be able to produce its foodstuffs, and there are also many types of foods that come from the Arab countries. All in all, we have this vast field to be explored, to be tapped into in depth. For example, halal foods. Brazil is an expert, and Brazil is the largest producer of halal protein. And we do have examples of Brazilian companies such as BRF. It is possible to install units, production units in Arab countries by means of government incentives, by means of partnerships as well. So there are many strategic types of partnerships. It's not only about selling and buying, and this is what we're going to discuss today. So once again, I would like to thank the partners who have accepted to be here, and we are going to be listening to them. It's going to be a quite rich and vital debate for the year of 2021. It's very much important to continue and consolidate the partnerships. Thank you again. And I would like to invite our Manager of Institutional Relations, Ms. Fernanda Baltazar, to moderate this webinar. Thank you, Ms. Baltazar. You have the floor. So thank you, Ms. Hanum, Mr. Hanum. It's a pleasure to hold this webinar together with ABIA, our partner. So it's been a while. We had been rehearsing to hold this webinar, but it's materialized and it's at the right moment. It's 2021. We have much to discuss. And the theme of food security, as you said, Mr. Hanu, it's highly strategic and highly relevant, especially when we speak about the relationship between Brazil and the Arab countries. So we'll have different perspectives here, the perspective of Brazil, the perspective of the food industry, hereby represented by ABIA. We have the International Consulting Services. We'll hear an overview. We'll discuss the COVID. We have Ms. Ozemela. She's a Brazilian lady, the CEO of Dima Consult at Qatar. So there's been recovery in this market, which is so much relevant for the discussions in 2021. And we are going to have Mr. Solimeo, the head of the international office in Dubai, speaking of the Arab countries, 22 countries and their opportunities. So let's begin with the webinar. It's going to be great discussion. I would like to invite Ms. Graziele Parenti, the president of ABIA. She's going to discuss the potential of business of the food industry in the Arab countries. It's your floor.
Hi, good morning, Fernanda. Good morning, Mr. Hanun. Thank you for having me. As Ms. Baltazar said, we've been partners for a long time, and the other webinar was so successful that we decided to have another one to kick off this year in the right way. So I would like to thank everyone at the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce and at ABIA. We truly value this topic. In this past year, we really reinforced our committee for foreign trade because we have Brazilian businesses and we have international businesses. So ABIA needs to be able to help people have access to the market. We have a number of Brazilian companies in our association, and we feel like it's important to really stress this topic. That is why we have a close collaboration with the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce for the reasons that you have already mentioned. We have a lot of tradition and a long history together. In the food industry, 2020 was a huge challenge. But as Mr. Hanun said, the Brazilian food industry not only was able to do what it had to do, but we didn't have a lack of food security, and we were able to supply Brazilians and foreigners alike with an increase in exports. This goes to show not only how resilient we are in Brazil internally, but also that we are able to export a lot. The Brazilian food industry has credibility, and international clients and customers can count on us. It is also important to say that this partnership, this collaboration has been around for 4 or 5 decades. And this is how we build things, little by little. This is what I believe in. And I think we were only able to have this kind of collaboration between the Chamber and ABIA because we trust each other. We've learned about customers and consumers. We've shown them how we do things. And this is what we want to do in every bit of collaboration we have. In Arab countries, they are always working towards food security and also food safety, both of them. Brazil is a leader in this industry. We've been truly progressing in this direction. And we value this kind of collaboration even when it comes to technology. We've also learned a lot from Arab countries because they've become logistics hubs. Their retail is also very modern, and we can learn from them. So, when it comes to food services, bars, and restaurants, things have evolved a lot. Of course, everyone was hit by the pandemic, and we were even talking about the vaccine earlier, right, Mr. Hanun? And they have been doing well with the vaccination procedures in Arab countries. We also want to hold this kind of collaboration to work on distribution in these cases. I think it is also important to talk about halal certification. Brazil has understood it and has created collaborations with people who know about it, people who have the knowledge, people in Arab countries. And we've been able to cater to this market because of this kind of collaboration. It works both ways. We learn from them and we teach them and take a lot of knowledge into our plans. Sustainability is also essential for us. The Brazilian food industry works according to the best practices in the world. And we know that Arab consumers expect that. The last time I visited Dubai, I think I was with Mr. Solimeo, by the way. We heard about organic food, sustainability, sourcing, certification, where it comes from, etc. So I think we are making progress together, and Brazil has very robust international certificates. We also need to figure out how to address consumer needs, not only in Brazil, but in other countries we export to. And we need to figure out how to deal with specific needs and expectations from specific countries. In our work, we know that we are going to have this collaboration for many more years. Mr. Hanun, I would also like to talk about Brazilian businesses going international. We see many Brazilian companies starting offices, distribution centers, and even factories in Arab countries. They are taking their knowledge to those places from Brazil, but they are also having a local presence. We see many businesses doing that. We have now the Chamber's office in Dubai. We see other Brazilian companies with a physical presence in the region. And this creates a good dynamic not only for imports and exports, but also investments. We are really optimistic. As the president of ABIA, I would like to highlight one again that we really appreciate our collaboration with the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. Once again, thank you for having me. We have a beautiful selection of panelists, and I'm really happy to be here. And I apologize because I will have to leave earlier because I have another appointment later, but I had to be here because this is a beautiful event. Thank you, Mr. Hanun. Thank you, Miss Parenti. These are very important topics. Sustainability has been getting more and more important, and it has a huge connection with halal food. And Brazil tries to work with it really well. And we have a very good presence in Arab countries for that. And yes, for sure, we do have room for improvement, and we have a lot to discuss. Now we have another big partner of ours, Sheikh Mahed Al Qasimi. He is the partner of the consultancy firm Soma Matter. We do hope this is the first of many events we'll have together. He is going to talk about food security after COVID-19 in the Gulf region. Fernanda, just a second. I know Miss Parenti will have to leave, so before she leaves, I would just like to thank her for our collaboration and for her opening remarks. Congratulations for the work you do at the association and at the company. Thank you very much, Mr. Hanun. Mr. Mahed, you may begin.
All right. Thank you very much. I hope the interpreters can hear me clearly.
Yes, thank you.
Right. All right. First of all, I'd like to thank the Arab Brazilian Chamber and Mr. Hanun for inviting us to be able to present here today. And also to Ms. Parenti and Abia for having us in what is going to be a very interesting discussion today. What I wanted to talk about today would really cover three major points, specifically challenges and responses we've had in the GCC and the wider Arab world to Corona and what we're seeing now in 2021, the The opportunities then for Brazil to be able to make the most out of the space and in the Arab countries' 21 plans, and then ultimately how one can facilitate engagement with the region. So I wanted to start with point one here, which is the challenges and responses in the GCC and the Arab world. So first of all, we've had real need to be dynamic with the pandemic-related supply disturbances. And this has really raised the profile for food security over the last year, both across the GCC and the Arab world. We find that in the region, there's a lot of focus on local production. With that, research and development across universities and consultative groups on international agriculture research, the CGIAR entities, has really been starting to drive home the focus on local food production. With that, education has also become very prominent. So agri-tech and food-related sectors are finding a lot of focus from governments and private sector as well. And finally, also farm consolidation and even professionalization in the local countries, and especially here in the UAE, we found that there's government moving in to be able to create larger capacity in these areas. I will say it hasn't happened, but we at Soma Mater believe that we should always keep one eye open for things like smart tariffs, where a little bit of local protectionism might start. And to keep that in mind, there are ways that we can discuss later on how we can essentially maneuver. Finally, there's also a national strategic stock enhancement project that is sweeping the region. And for instance, an example would be Saudi Arabia having put $110 million into a sourcing company. This is a JV between the National Logistics Company and the National Agricultural Company to ensure that they always have access, especially when times like Corona, any crises of logistics or otherwise separation comes up. And then ultimately of any importing, diversifying and emergency procurements have become also a major topic. Ultimately, there's only so much that can be produced in a country, and especially in the Arab world, where natural resources are limited. The ability to produce in country becomes very acute. Understanding water limitations, soil and other amendments for agriculture, the limitations of feed for livestock, trade becomes very critical, and ensuring that you're not over leveraged or focused on a single importer, this diversification has been very important. So looking at new countries to source food, and then also to the point where FDI, this foreign direct investment into smaller companies abroad to ensure and secure the export opportunities. Another thing that has happened over the last few months that has been very critical to creating more stability is really normalizing relations in the region. I'm sure everybody has heard about the normalization of relations with Israel, and the Arab world is now slowly picking up momentum. The UAE specifically has understood that to continue development in the region, stability is critical. And as such, you're going to see major agriculture tech influx into the region through these relations. We also have in the GCC, the relationship with Qatar is stabilized. And this is to ensure also that the GCC, the Gulf coalition, can leverage their joint resources and ensure inter-GCC trade is more functional. What does this mean also for our wider neighbors, such as Iran? Well, we do know that there are countries in the region that do provide opportunity for low-cost offerings of stable crops like onions, courgettes, even bell peppers. So what happens when that relationship is disrupted? What are the alternatives that the region can look to? These are some of the themes that we're dealing with here in the region, and we believe we're looking to more prosperous relationships, but we always weigh out the limitations of local production with the importance of access through trade. And this is where Brazil can step in. So to my second point, the opportunities for Brazil really are 4 or 5 interesting opportunities. First and foremost, other than the direct trade within the region, Brazil should really be looking upstream in the value chain and create new relationships with the region. For instance, support in research and development. If there is such a focus now, and as was said earlier, Brazil being experts at large-scale production systems, how can this know-how and the research that's being done in Brazil find its place here in the Gulf and in the Arab world to ensure that that know-how and the research is happening in situ, happening here in location? This will be critical to improving the trade opportunities as well as the know-how of the region. Could you even look at sort of professional or bilateral R&D research funds? Would there be a possibility for the private sector R&D to target regional challenges? The importance for understanding the region is that there is real context around each country's challenges, and being able to deal with those specifically with the larger capability of the Brazilian production sector and manufacturing sector, bringing the know-how in is going to be important. Also, supporting and building agriculture curricula or the education for undergraduate, graduate, and even doctoral research. So again, engaging with universities or even government research centers to be at the very origin of value for food production, manufacturing, and to have this joint journey essentially from innovation for the activities in the region. This places you at the heart of the initial, let's call it value production in country. Also, in that we have consolidation of agricultural practices. There's really technical support in farming efficiency that the Brazilians are famous for that can be brought here to the ground. So consulting on how to improve farm management, specifically the poultry sector, really could do with a new wave of efficiency. Ultimately, it's important that there is some, animal production units in the country, but with that, they have their own challenges of feedstock, feed conversion ratios and efficiencies, and even the genetics. And this is where Brazilian, whether it be technology or IP or even the manufacturers, can step in and really create more of a synergistic relationship with the producers here or the manufacturers. We also look at hardware. So the idea of mechanizing and industrializing certain practices here typically is the options available are looked to in Europe. And sometimes these are more costly production systems. Well, the Brazilians know how to create this at a cost-effective scale, and so this might be something where manufacturers or industrialists can come in and help efficiencies in the whole value chain. Ultimately, technology. With large-scale agriculture production, technology exists around that whole industry. And bringing those tech companies in on projects here, whether it's GIS mapping or the Internet of Things, could be very valuable to tie up with producers here in the country. Another perspective from a government and trade facilitation is quite important. As was said, we have a very sort of modern FMB, but we also have a very agile and modern government. And with that, the idea of digital certification for smoother supply and confidence building in Brazilian products will really create confidence in the consumer. It will facilitate trade, and ultimately will create more of a demand side pull where the customer knows and can see very clearly the guarantee that is Brazilian produce. Clarity on halal. Halal is very important for the region. And I would advise for a proactive relationship on the things halal. In what we have today as an understanding for halal, we're seeing a lot of modernization of halal as a practice. And the certification required in different countries needs to bring some harmonization to practices. And Brazil has been very good to be able to have halal certification controlled very well. And what we want to see is more proactive engagement on this, because it will be for the benefit of everybody involved. Ultimately, the ability to leverage country offices today, such as the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, is going to be critical. And I say this because I know limitations in travel today. So where you have already people and feet on the ground, like Rafael, who's here to really be your eye and ears, that's going to be important to be able to leverage that as much as possible and to give the context of what you're looking for, and vice versa. So being able to leverage the offices would be critical, in that they will help not only translate opportunity and what is being done in the country, but also the cultural nuances of doing business in the region. When I mentioned smart tariffs, I would really think about, if these tariffs were to come, you need to have an eye on being able to move either up or downstream for where the tariff might exist. So is there a capability, if you're supplying produce, that you move into actually developing manufacturing capabilities? Or can you export know-how and technology as opposed to produce? There are new opportunities in IP and technology and know-how that need to be capitalized on to ensure that you are not essentially held to ransom by a single transaction. And I think Brazil has a lot of opportunity that still can be uncovered to be provided to the Arab world. Ultimately, stability in the region from a political sense is great, but we also understand that we're at the mercy of stability in other regions and other countries. And one reoccurring theme that we see, especially in the last year, was rice. Now, Brazil is one of the major top 10 rice exporters, but is there more space for rice from Brazil to close the gap that we have from maybe, say, India, where up and down you see political sort of changes around exports put the Arab world at risk, and we culturally are rice eaters. And so maybe there's an opportunity for Brazil to cross that gap and create more presence for rice out of Brazil. We will always be understood as the logistics center, and the UAE specifically has quite an opportune position, being sort of at the nexus of the East and West, North and South. But understanding that maybe what you can do through us into wider reaching opportunities outside the region is always an opportunity. And there are plenty of Arab countries that also have platforms that you can engage with. So thinking sometimes as maybe not this as the end market, but as the step to the end market is always important to do. Finally, we talk about F&B digitization, and where there can be a lot of opportunity is with the density that you have in certain cities in the Arab world, the kind of digital technologies that even can piggyback on the food and agriculture into the consumer side would be interesting. And if there are any other companies that have that, it would be very interesting to see coming out of Brazil. Finally, I'd like to talk about facilitating engagement. So if you think about how many Brazilian companies exist already, and even as part of ABIA, the kind of collective power that they have, creating a consortium really to facilitate, whether it be to deal with certain challenges or a certain context in an Arab country, is going to be important. So the idea is, if you can reach out, you will be, as a group, more powerful to solve a problem than just dealing as a single company moving in. And ultimately, as was mentioned, BRF, but the idea of JVs being a good opportunity to create really long-term relationships for the region. So that, in a nutshell, is what we think is possible here in the region. I really think there's a lot of opportunity that we can talk about maybe in the Q&A. But I know that both Abia and the Chamber have both been very strong about creating a corridor of trade, and I look forward to seeing more of that in the future. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Maja.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Kazemi. There was a great deal of information. There's much to be done, especially about after the COVID pandemic and everything that you spoke about. Regardless of the sectors, we have to work with the information. It's very much linked to education. We have to address technology and digitizing. This is more important than ever. And we had to be agile in our development. So you brought a great deal of points for this enriched discussion. Thank you so much for that. And now, following through with the agenda, Ms. Dr. Luana Osemela, the CEO of Dima Consult, headquartered in Qatar. It's very nice to be here amongst friends. So Ms. Osemela has been our partner, as Mr. Hanoun said in the beginning, and Mr. Mansour. They had the opportunity of meeting her in person in Qatar. So I would like to invite her to speak about Qatar, the context in Qatar, the scenario, and the opportunities that we envisage with the World Cup next year. This is deeply related to food and beverage industries. So thank you, Ms. Osemela. You have the floor.
Fernanda,
Thank you,
senhoras e
Fernanda.
senhores.
Ladies and gentlemen, good
Obrigada por estarem
morning,
aqui,
good
obrigada
afternoon.
pelo
Thank you so much
convite.
for being here. I would like to thank you
Primeiro
all
eu
for
quero
the
agradecer
invitation.
ao Majid também,
First, I
assim,
would like to
teu
thank
discurso super
Mr.
alinhado com o
Al-Kazemi.
que a gente também acredita
Your
muito
presentation was quite in
aqui
line with
no
our
Catar.
beliefs here in Qatar.
Bom, eu preciso começar dizendo
Well, I
que
need
a
to
Dima,
begin
que é uma empresa
saying
que é
that
brasileira,
Dima
né,
Consult is a
está
Brazilian company.
estabelecida no Qatar Financial Center, que é o
It is
centro financeiro
established
do
in the
Qatar.
Qatar Financial
É a
Center,
primeira
which is the
empresa
financial center in
brasileira
Qatar. It is
que é
the first
focada no
Brazilian
tema
company that
de
is
cooperação
focused on
bilateral,
bilateral
desenvolvimento
cooperation efforts
internacional com
and also
foco na América
international
Latina e no Brasil,
development
né,
linked
em
to Latin
promocionar
America
essa
and
relação
Brazil,
entre
aiming
as
at
duas
promoting this
regiões.
relationship
Eu
between
tenho
the
que
two
dizer que
regions.
realmente a
And
gente
I
está
must say
num
that
momento
we are
extraordinário
truly in
para o
an
Catar, né,
extraordinary
na história
moment
do Catar.
for Qatar in
As
the history
previsões
of
do
Qatar.
FMI, do Banco
The
Mundial, por
IMF
exemplo,
and the
foram
World Bank,
significativamente
Qatar
melhoradas. E as
forecasts were
perspectivas econômicas
significantly
agora
improved,
para 2021, por
and the
causa da
economic
normalização das
prospect for
relações com os
2021, because
vizinhos
we
do
have
Golfo,
normalized our
né? Ou
relationships with the
seja,
Gulf
são
neighboring
extremamente
countries. So
positivas.
the forecasts
Há
are really
mais
positive.
confiança agora, né, no doing
There's more
business no
reliability
Catar,
in the doing
novamente,
business
né?
in Qatar once
Mas
again.
quais são as perspectivas
But
econômicas,
what is
né,
the
com o fim do
economic
bloqueio,
outlook
com o
with the end of the
pós-Covid,
blocking
pré-Copa do Mundo
in the
2022,
post-COVID
né? E quais são
era
algumas das
with the World Cup
características
in
básicas desse
2022? What
país
are the
que
basic
poucos
characteristics of our
conhecem na
country that
América
very few
Latina, né,
people
em termos da
know there
atividade
in Latin
bancária,
America?
logística,
In terms of our
indústria
banking
petrolífera, não
activity,
petrolífera,
logistics,
imobiliária,
oil
investimentos,
industry,
né? E quais
non-oil
são as
industry,
oportunidades
real estate
existentes? Eu quero tocar em
industry,
todos
and
esses
what are the
pontos.
opportunities that we foresee? And I
Bem,
would like to touch
a
on
economia do
all of
Catar
those
deve se
points.
recuperar esse
The
ano, com uma
Qatar
previsão do
economy
Banco
should
Mundial de
recover this
crescer
year.
pelo
The
menos
World Bank
3%
forecast is that the
no
growth
ano
is
de
going to be at
2021.
least
Isso
3%
significa
in
que
the
o
year of
Catar vai ter a
2021.
melhor
This
taxa de
means that
crescimento
Qatar
do
is going
PIB
to
de
have the
todo o Golfo.
best
Né? A
GDP growth
inflação do
rate
Catar
in the
deve ficar
entire
em torno de
Gulf region.
1,8%,
Our
com uma
inflation should be
população de apenas
1.8%.
2,8
Our
milhões de
population is
pessoas.
just
Né?
2.8 million
Catar tem uma
people. So
pontuação
Qatar
alta
has a
numa
very high
variedade de
score
métricas de
in
competitividade
many
a nível global, geralmente em
competitiveness
primeiro lugar na
metrics
região,
at the
como por
global level.
exemplo,
We usually
Catar é
rank
primeiro
first
lugar
in the
entre
region.
todos os
We
países do
rank
Golfo no
first
índice de
amongst all of
segurança
the Gulf
alimentar
countries in terms of
global
the
e
food
13º
industry.
lugar
And
no mundo.
13th, we rank
O Catar
13th
possui
in
uma
the
economia
world.
que se
So Qatar
diversifica
has a
rapidamente
diversified
e
economy,
diminuindo gradativamente o
and we
peso
are
do setor
gradually
de
reducing
petróleo e
the weight
gás
of
na
the oil and
composição do
gas
seu PIB. Já
industry in the
foi
composition of our
56%
GDP. It
em
used to be
2012 e
56% in
hoje é apenas
2012, but today
35% e
it
segue caindo.
amounts to
O país é
36% only,
considerado uma
and
potência
it's
econômica,
falling.
né? No
So it
centro
is
de
an
uma região que é
economic power.
dinâmica
We are in the
e que
center
está em
of this
crescimento. O
dynamic region
Catar
that is
está
growing
posicionado no
steadily.
coração do
So
Golfo,
Qatar is
com
positioned
cerca
in the
de
heart of the
25
Gulf with
economias
25
localizadas num
other
raio
local
de 3 mil
economies
quilômetros.
located in a
Né? Ou
radius of
seja, o Catar está na
3,000
intersecção
kilometers.
de 3
So Qatar
continentes,
is in the
com
intersection of
proximidade aos
3
principais
different
mercados na Europa,
continents. We are
na
close to the
Ásia,
main
na
markets in
África.
Europe, in
Né?
Asia,
Tem
and in Africa.
60% da
So we
população
account for
mundial a um
60%
alcance de 8
of
horas de
the
voo e
global
o acesso
population. So we
aos
can reach
principais
this
mercados
population
mundiais
by
em menos de
flight,
18
and we
dias
have
por
access to the
navio.
global markets,
Quando
and
a
it
gente
takes
olha para a
less than 18
aceleração
days
rumo à
by
Copa do
vessels.
Mundo
So
FIFA
we are
de
going to hold the
2022,
World Cup in
evento que
2022.
deve ancorar o
It is
crescimento
an event
da
that should
demanda,
boost
ao
our
passo
growth
que a
and
fase
our demand.
essa fase final dos
So
investimentos
this
em
final
construção,
stage of
né,
investments in
vão
construction,
concluindo.
we're
O
about to
torneio em
conclude
si é
the
considerado
construction
grande
efforts.
impulso
The
para o
World
setor
Cup
de
will be a
serviços,
big
né,
boost
com
for the
projeções
service
de mais de 1
sector.
milhão de
Our
torcedores,
forecast is that there'll be more
espetáculo
than 1
futebolístico
million
de
people, 1
mês.
million visitors
Para
coming to the
a
World
Copa
Cup
do Mundo de
that will
Clubes que vai
last for a
acontecer
month.
agora, semana
The
que
Club
vem.
World Cup that is going to be held
Ou
next
seja, o
week.
número de espectadores
Well,
vai ser
the number
limitado
of
a
viewers is
30%
going to
só
be
da
limited
capacidade
to
de
30%
cada
of the
dos
capacity
estádios de
of each of the
40 mil
stadia.
lugares que
They
receberão
hold
os jogos.
40,000 seats.
Teste,
This will be
distanciamento
a
social, uso
test
de
for
máscara,
social
uso de
distancing and the use of
aplicativo, de
masks and
rastreamento
the
de
use of
contatos.
apps and the
Tudo vai
tracing of
ser obrigatório
contact.
durante os
Everything
jogos
is
aqui
going
do
to be
Catar. E
mandatory
os
in
fãs
the Club
internacionais,
Cup.
infelizmente,
And the
não podem
international
ainda
fans,
entrar no
unfortunately,
país.
they cannot
No
come to
entanto,
our
o Catar está
country yet.
planejando uma Copa do
However,
Mundo
Qatar is planning
2022
for the World Cup
relativamente
in
normal,
2022 that is going to be
por
relatively
causa dos
normal,
avanços, né,
as we
que a gente está
foresee,
vendo com a
because of
vacina.
the advancements that we see and
Então,
the
falando de
improvements with the
Copa, agora
vaccination.
passamos para o
So
outlook
speaking of the
econômico,
World
né?
Cup,
Apesar
well,
de
that was
existir
it.
uma
Let's talk
grande
about the economic
percepção
outlook.
internacional de
There's this
que há
major
uma
international
abundância de
perception that
liquidez
there is abundance
interna,
of
né?
internal domestic
A gente recebe
liquidity here.
muitas demandas
We
para
receive
projetos de
many
investimento no Brasil,
demands for
mas a
investment
gente
projects in Brazil.
precisa aclarar que,
But we need to
apesar do
clarify
Catar, né, ser
that
o país mais
in
rico em
spite of
termos per
Qatar being
capita,
the
o
most
setor
rich
bancário do
country
Catar, no
per
entanto, é o
capita,
mais
the
dependente de
banking sector
financiamento
in Qatar
externo de
highly
todas
depends
as
on
economias do
foreign
Golfo.
investments
Os
if we compare with the
passivos
other economies in
externos
the
do
Gulf.
Catar
The
atualmente representam
external liability of Qatar
45% do
account
total de
for
financiamento
45%
dentro
of
do
the
país.
total
Em
financing
contrapartida, a
sector in
Arábia
the country.
Saudita, por
On the other
exemplo, os
hand, in Saudi
passivos
Arabia, for
externos
example, the
representam só
external
6%
liability
do
accounts
financiamento
for
total.
6% of the
Então, por
total
causa
funding
disso, foram
industry.
tomadas
And because of
medidas
that,
como
measures have
criação de
been
novas
taken,
leis, né,
like the
aprovação de
creation and the
lei de
passing of
parceria
the new
público-privada,
laws for
lei de
public
promoção de
private
investimentos,
partnerships,
leis
laws
e
on
reforma nas
promotion
leis
of investments,
imobiliárias para
the
atrair
reform of
mais
the real
entrada de
estate
capital
laws
estrangeiro
to
e
attract
abertura de
more
novas
foreign
empresas, né?
investment and
O
to be able
fim
to
do
open
bloqueio,
more
com o fim do bloqueio,
corporations.
o Qatar
With the
Financial
end of
Center,
the blockade,
onde estamos, quer
uh,
atrair cerca de
will
25
be
bilhões de
attracting
dólares em
$25
investimento
billion
estrangeiro,
in
criar
foreign
10 mil
investments to
novos
Qatar.
empregos e
We want to
trazer
create
mais de
10,000
1.000
new
novas
jobs
empresas
and
até
establish more than
2022.
1,000
A
new
normalização da
corporations by
disputa regional
2022. This
de 3
normalizing
anos
of the
vai
regional
com certeza
disputes that
ajudar
took 3
também na
years will
logística
certainly
comercial.
help us in
Né?
the
As
commercial
sanções
logistics.
econômicas e a
The
baixa
economic
liquidez criaram
sanctions and the
nesses 3
low
anos caos
liquidity
no
in
mercado
these
de
3
câmbio
years have
do
created
real,
chaos
né? Que é bem
in the
parecido com a nossa
exchange
moeda, se
rate
chama real.
market. Our currency is the real. It's quite similar
Apesar
to
da
the Brazilian
indexação
real.
que
And
existe
in
hoje, né, o
spite
real
of the
indexado ao dólar,
monetary correction, we are
apesar dessa
pegged to
indexação
the
ter
dollar
sido
rate. So in
historicamente
spite of
apoiado por
that,
reservas
this
estrangeiras
has been
saudáveis, né,
historically
ativos do
supported
Qatar
by
Investment Authority
sound
ao longo dos
international
anos, mas à
reserves.
medida que a liquidez
But as
externa cresce e as fronteiras
foreign
comerciais
liquidity
reabrem,
grows,
né, a
and as
gente
we
deve
reopen
observar uma
the commercial
convergência
borders,
pouco
we'll
melhor da
witness
moeda local do Qatar,
convergence
né,
of the
tanto
local
onshore,
currency
offshore, do
in
spot
Qatar,
currency, né.
onshore,
Então,
offshore, and
isso
also in
traz
the
melhor
spot
ânimo para os
currency
investidores, menor
market.
risco
This will bring
geopolítico,
lower geopolitical geopolitical risk, to the investors, a better
né, é bom
economic
para toda a
outlook,
região.
and it's good for
O
the entire
comércio
region.
Qatar,
The
GCC antes da
GCC
normalização, que
Qatar
era cerca
trade
de 12
before
bilhões de Qatari
normalizing, it accounted for
real,
2
né, já
million
está aí sendo
Qatar
prevista para
real,
ter um
but
crescimento
the
quase
forecast
imediato para
is
15
to having
bilhões.
immediate
E os
growth
Emirados
amounting
Árabes
to
Unidos,
15
ao retirarem
million.
a
And the
restrição
United
ao
Arab
comércio e a
Emirates, they
viagens, por
removed,
exemplo,
restrictions
também
to
vão
trade
ajudar na
and to
recuperação
traveling,
do
and this
comércio
will also
regional,
help to
possivelmente
recover the
levando a
regional
menos
trade.
volumes até de
So
trânsito
there'll
via
be,
o porto e o aeroporto de
lower
Oman, né,
volumes
depois
in
de ter
the
beneficiado
Oman port and
tremendamente, né,
airports.
Oman devido ao
This will
redirecionamento.
highly benefit
Mas
Oman because of the
e
redirection
as
of the
aberturas de
shipment,
fronteira
and
entre
we are going
o
to have the
Catar e a Arábia
opening of
Saudita
borders
também é
between
um
Qatar
desenvolvimento
and Saudi
fenomenal para o
Arabia.
comércio
This is
em
a
geral.
great
Então, com
development
tudo isso, a
for
gente vê
trade in general.
fluxo mais
So with that,
regular de
we see more regular
mercadorias
flows
entre o
of
Catar e os demais
merchandise
países do
between
Golfo.
Qatar and the
A
other
gente
Gulf
espera também
countries.
que haja
So we also
aumento da
expect to
comercialização
see
de
an
alimentos,
increase
de
in
produtos
trading of
farmacêuticos
foodstuffs
e
and
produtos
pharmaceutical
relacionados à
products
construção,
and
né,
products related to
nos
the
próximos
construction
meses. Mas
sector
e o
in the
Brasil e a
forthcoming
América
months.
Latina?
But how about
Né?
Brazil and Latin
Hoje é
America?
importante dizer
So today it is
que
important to say
menos
that
de 1% do
less than
potencial comercial
1% of the
entre a
trade
América
potential
Latina e o
between Latin
GCC está
America
sendo
and the
utilizada.
GCC
Né? Isso
has
são
been
dados do Banco
used.
Interamericano de
So this is
Desenvolvimento.
data from the
E isso
Inter-American
significa
Development
que
Bank,
isso não,
and it
nada
means,
significa minimizar o valor monetário que
well, that
isso
we should not
significa, né?
minimize
São
or
bilhões de dólares anuais, o
disregard
Brasil
what it
capturando
means.
quase 60%
Brazil
do total,
captures
né,
60%
comercializado
of the
entre as
total
duas
amount that is
regiões.
traded between
Afinal
the
de
two
contas, o que
regions.
importa é esse
All in
valor,
all,
né, para
what
as
really
empresas que estão
matters
fazendo
is the
negócio, como
amounts.
as
There are
empresas membros
companies
da
doing
BIA
business,
e da
such as
Câmara, né?
ABIA
Mas,
members and the
apesar
chamber
de
members
ambas,
doing business.
ambas regiões investirem
And
muito
both
no
regions are
exterior,
highly
no entanto,
investing
elas não investem
abroad.
entre
In
si.
spite of that,
Né?
they're
As
not investing in
multinacionais
each other's
latino-americanas,
countries.
por
The
exemplo,
Latin American
têm
multinationals, for example,
37 mil subsidiárias
they have
ao redor do mundo, né?
57,000
Operando em
subsidiaries around
850
the world,
setores econômicos
operating in
distintos.
850
Mas, segundo
different
dados do Banco
sectors.
Mundial em
But according to
2018,
data of
só
the World
5
Bank from
empresas
2018, just
multinacionais
5
na América Latina estavam
multinationals from
ativamente
Latin
operando
America
na
were
região do Golfo.
actively
Né?
operating
Então,
in the
além
Gulf
disso,
region.
existem milhares de
So there are
produtos que
thousands
cada
of
região compra
products
e vende para o
that the
resto do
regions
mundo,
buy
que
and sell
poderiam
to the entire
passar a comprar e
world,
vender
and they
entre
could
si,
start
né, com
selling
maior
and buying
eficiência, menor preços,
amongst
maior
these
competitividade e
countries
ganhos
with a
para todo
lower
mundo.
cost and
Então,
a
as
high
empresas
efficiency
brasileiras
and
precisam
greater
começar a ver o
gains to
Catar e o
everyone.
Golfo como
So
aliados
you
nos
need to
seus
see in
projetos de
Qatar and in the
expansão
Gulf
global. Né? Muito
allies
alinhado
in
com o
your
que o
projects for
Magid
global
também
expansion,
comentou,
just
né?
like
O
Mr.
projeto de
Al-Qadimi
segurança
said.
alimentar do Porto de
So a
Hamad, aqui no
food
Catar, está
security
pronto para colocar o
project from the
Catar no
Hamad
mapa
port
dos hubs
is ready,
do Golfo,
ready to
né? E se
place
tornar um forte
Qatar
hub de
as
exportação
one
de
of the
alimentos.
greatest
Esse
hubs
projeto
for
vai garantir
exporting
alimentos
foodstuffs.
localmente
This
para
will ensure
todos
the
no
local
Catar,
supply of
né? E
foodstuffs
depois
to
pretende
everyone,
exportar para diferentes
first in
mercados
Qatar, and then we intend
estrangeiros.
to export
Essa foi a
to
primeira,
other
na
foreign
verdade,
markets.
iniciativa
This
público-privada
was
lançada pelo
the
Catar,
first
né? A
public-private partnership
importância
that
que
was
é a segurança alimentar.
set by Qatar, showing the
Então,
importance of food security here
e
in
o
Qatar.
hub em
And
Hamad, no
at
porto
the
de Hamad,
Hamad
inclui fábricas,
port
plantas de
hub
processamento,
includes
silos,
processing
reservatórios de
plants,
arroz, de
silos,
açúcar bruto, de óleos
rice,
comestíveis,
raw
tudo isso está
sugar,
pronto.
edible
A
oil,
infraestrutura está
silos,
pronta para
everything is
receber.
ready. The
Né? Então,
infrastructure is ready
em
to receive this
2020,
trading
a
flow.
DIMA também
So
participou
in 2020,
do
DIMA
primeiro
Consult
evento internacional
participated in the
sobre
first international
PPPs aqui
event
no
on
Catar. A gente
PPPs, the
apresentou a
public-private
experiência do
partnerships.
Brasil em
So we
PPP
showed
e
the Brazilian
falamos similar
experience
ao que o
in
Magid
PPP.
disse, que a gente precisa
And just like he
exportar
said, we
know-how.
need
O
to
Brasil tem
export
muito know-how
know-how. Brazil
fazendo
has a
boas
good deal
PPPs
of
e fazendo
know-how.
PPPs não tão boas, mas a gente
Okay, we
precisa
have some
exportar o
good and not
know-how
so good PPPs,
e
but we need to
ajudar os nossos
export that
parceiros no Golfo
know-how,
a
and we need
talvez
to help
aprender
the
com os nossos
partners in the
aprendizados. E
Gulf
eles valorizam
to
muito
learn with
isso,
us, and they
né?
give a lot of value
Então,
to that.
ou seja, agora até voltando um pouco para a
And going
questão
back to
dos
the
investimentos, né, que
topic
o
of
Catar
the
tem feito.
investments
Para a
that Qatar
Copa,
has
até o
been
momento,
making.
se
For the
prevê, ou
World
até
Cup,
2022, se
up
prevê
until
que o Catar vai
2022, we
gastar
foresee
uns
that
100
Qatar will
bilhões de
have
dólares
invested
em
$100 billion
preparação
in
à
preparing
infraestrutura vinculada
for
com a
the
Copa do
infrastructure
Mundo de
related to the
2022.
World Cup
Né? O
in
orçamento de
2022.
2021 agora
So the
foi aprovado
budget for
recentemente, né?
2021 that was
Os
recently
principais
approved,
projetos alocados
and the key
já foi
projects
alocado
that
cerca de
receive
72
allocation,
bilhões de
72
Qatari
billion
reals, né? Que
Qatari
tem mais ou menos cerca de,
reals were
de 20 a
allocated.
30
It's more or less
bilhões de
20 to
dólares
30
nesse
billion
ano
dollars that were
somente para
allocated just for the
concluir os
budget
projetos
of
da
this
FIFA,
year
né?
to
Mas
finalize the FIFA projects. Well, but
dessa
the
relação
normalizing of the
no Golfo deve
relationship
estimular os
and the
turistas a
Gulf
voltarem,
will
né, ao
encourage the
Catar quando a
tourists to
pandemia
come back to Qatar.
acabar. A gente vai ver uma retomada
So we'll
de
see
movimentação de
a
profissionais do
recovery
setor de
in the
serviços que vão
traveling of
ajudar no setor
professionals from the
imobiliário,
service sector.
hoteleiro.
This is
Né?
going to help
Isso
the
tudo vai ajudar a reduzir
hospitality
uma pressão, grande pressão
sector,
que tem sobre o
and this
setor
will
imobiliário
reduce the
do
pressure that we
país,
have on the real
né?
estate sector that we have right
Isso
now in
porque
our
as
country.
atividades imobiliárias, obviamente, de
Well, the
construção
real estate
assumem um fluxo
activities and the
normal,
construction
né, de
activities will
turistas, o
resume a
que a
normal
gente não tem
flow. There'll
visto
be a normal
nesse
flow of
último ano.
tourists that we have
Mas o
not seen
Catar
in the
hoje
last year.
possui apenas
But Qatar
27 mil
today
quartos de
has
hotel,
just
né?
27,000
Substancialmente
rooms in
abaixo do
hotels, which is
mínimo que seria
substantially
60
below
mil
the
quartos
minimum that should be
necessários para acomodar
60,000
os
rooms
hóspedes
that are
durante a Copa do
required
Mundo,
to
né?
receive the
Mas tem
guests
planejado
during the
aí
World
16
Cup.
hotéis de
But we
luxo
have planned
pré-rodados
16
e
luxury
outros 10
hotels that
hotéis
will
a
come,
partir de
and additional
2021.
10
Então, tudo
hotels that will
isso
be
é uma
built as
oportunidade
of
de negócio no
2021.
setor
This is
alimentício,
all
no
business
setor de
opportunities for
serviços, né?
the
Setor
food
de
and the
alimentação, de
service
serviços.
sectors.
O Qatar
The catering
vem
sector as
construindo
well. So
também
Qatar
centros
has
de
been building
negócios
business
integrados,
centers,
dedicados a diferentes
integrated business
indústrias,
sectors
né?
that are
Fornecendo
dedicated to
único
different
ponto de acesso
industries,
aos mercados
supplying a single
mundiais
point of access to the
e uma
world
especialização
market.
setorial. A
And we
cidade
specialize
da
in sectors.
energia, né?
We have the
Que está
city
sendo
of the
construída,
energy. This is under
a
construction
cidade do
right now.
esporte, que já
We have the
existe, a cidade
sports
da
city,
mídia e da
the media
tecnologia, que vai
and
receber
technology
aí
city that
o
will
data center da
receive
Microsoft,
the
a cidade da
Microsoft data center,
educação,
the
o
education
parque de
city,
ciência e
the
tecnologia, as
science and
zonas
technology
francas no Catar,
complex, the
né?
free
Todos
zones in Qatar, the free trade zones in
hubs, né?
Qatar.
Esses
So
centros
all of these
integrados de
centers
negócios
and
são
integrated
são o
business
lar, a casa,
hubs
foram
are
feitos
the
para ser a casa de
home. They
players
were made to be
globais. E
the
por que
home of
não
global
players
players.
brasileiros?
And why not
Né?
Brazilian
Então,
players?
o bloqueio, apesar de
So
todos os
the
males, né,
blockade,
levou o Catar a
in
acelerar
spite
a
of
sua
all of the
agenda de
evils, it
autossuficiência
allowed us to
alimentar num
accelerate our agenda
contexto
of
de
food
terra árida,
self-sufficiency in this
escassez de água
context
doce,
of
né,
this
que todos
barren
sabemos que
land
existe por
and
aqui,
scarcity
né, essas
of fresh water.
políticas,
We are
como eu
aware that
falei,
this
incluem
happens here.
grandes instalações,
So major
investimento
policies
em
were
pesquisa
passed,
e
including
tecnologia,
investments in
em
research and
eficiência energética, e
technology,
como fazer,
major
por exemplo,
facilities,
dessalinização
and
com
how to
eficiência energética,
desalinize,
porque
for example, with
dessalinização, apesar,
energy
né, de
efficiency,
ser
because
bom,
desalinizing,
bom mecanismo de
it's a very good
sustentabilidade, consome
method
muita energia.
for
Então, o Qatar
sustainability, but
também
it
preocupado com isso,
consumes
como
a
que a
lot of
gente faz
power.
algo que
So
a gente
Qatar was
precisa de
concerned
maneira
about that.
mais
How can we go
sustentável,
about
né?
doing this in a more sustainable
E,
fashion?
apesar de existirem dúvidas,
And
né,
although
quanto
there
à
are many
viabilidade econômica,
questions in
sustentabilidade
terms of the
fiscal
fiscal
dessas
sustainability
políticas
and the economic
nacionais, né,
feasibility of
porque
our
exigem
national policies, because they
nível
do require
significativo
a
de
significant
capex
level of
público,
capex,
né? No
public
entanto, o
capital investments.
superávit, o
However,
superávit orçamentário
our
do
budget
país hoje é cerca de
surplus
US$ 1 bilhão,
is approximately
né?
$1
Estão
billion.
dispostos a pagar pelo
So they're
preço
willing
para
to
garantir o
pay
acesso e a
to ensure
disponibilidade de
access
alimentos
and
para toda a sua
availability of
população,
food
né?
for
Uma
the
população
entire
que hoje está
population
mais
of the country.
atenta à
So
sua
the
saúde, ao
population
meio
today is paying more
ambiente, né? Que
attention
está
to health,
exigindo
to the environment.
significativamente mais
The
produtos
population
frescos,
is demanding more and
locais,
more local
né?
and fresh
Lanches
products,
saudáveis, né?
healthy foods.
Principalmente a partir do Covid, né? Foram feitos
Especially after
estudos
the
sobre o
COVID
comportamento dos
pandemic,
hábitos
there were
dos
some studies that
consumidores, e
were
isso
made
tem
on the
buscado então se a
consumption habits
indústria
of
de
the
snacks,
consumers.
healthy
So
snacks,
the
vai
healthy
ser
snacks industry
tem tido um
will
grande
have
boom
a
e uma
boom
escassez, né,
There's
aqui
also a
na demanda
scarcity of
nacional.
such
Então, a
products in our
estratégia
country.
nacional
So the
de
national
autossuficiência e o
strategy
Programa
for
Nacional de
self-sufficiency
Segurança
and the
Alimentar
national
do Catar
program of
está
food
ajudando o
security
país a
in
se
Qatar
tornar
is really
autossuficiente já.
helping the
Né?
country to become
Hoje,
self-sufficient.
e surgem demandas para nós também,
So
queremos exportar certas coisas,
people
mas
say
o
we
Catar
want
já
to
é
export
autossuficiente
certain
em
items,
leite,
but
em
Qatar is
frango, em
self-sufficient in
ovos e está
milk,
caminhando
in
em
poultry,
alguns tipos de
in eggs,
vegetais
and we are
frescos, muito
developing
rapidamente,
further
tudo
efforts
através
in
de
fresh
greenhouses,
vegetables. We are
investimentos,
using
grandes
the
investimentos em
greenhouses. There have
greenhouses.
been major
Então,
investments in
de modo geral,
greenhouses, in
se a gente olha
nurseries.
para o panorama,
So
com o
if we look
risco
into the
geopolítico
perspective,
diminuindo, né,
with the
ele vai
reduced
agregar mais valor,
geopolitical
vai
risk, this
exigir mais
will
valor
add
agregado no
further
comércio, é o que
value.
a gente estava
The
falando, é a gente
trade will
exportar know-how,
request
exportar
additional added
tecnologia,
value. That's
né?
what we were talking
E
about,
a gente vai,
exporting technology, for example.
obviamente a gente já tem um fluxo mais
And of
livre
course,
de
we'll
mercadorias.
have a
Então,
more
em
fluid flow
resumo,
of
o
merchandise.
Catar vai
So,
melhorar a sua capacidade de ir aos
summarizing,
mercados
Qatar will
internacionais
improve its
também, tomar
capacity to reach
empréstimo
out
no
to the
momento que
international
precisa
markets
tomar
and
empréstimo.
to
Ou
borrow
seja,
money
o
whenever
bloqueio
required.
impulsionou a
Well,
economia do
the
Catar. Essa é a
blockade
boa
actually
notícia,
boosted our
né?
economy. This
O
is the good
fim do
news.
bloqueio
And the
tem que
end
ser
of the
visto como um
blockade has to be
desenvolvimento
seen
positivo
as a
para a
positive
integração
unfolding
regional,
for
né?
the
O Catar
regional
ficou mais
integration.
independente,
So Qatar became more
diversificou a sua economia,
independent.
né?
We were able to
Adquiriu novos
diversify our
aliados
economy. We gained new
internacionais. Então,
international
agora que o
allies.
bloqueio acabou,
So now
o
that the
Catar
blocking has
quer
come to an
receber
end,
seus parceiros
Qatar
em
wants
casa,
to welcome
né?
its
Ele não
partners
quer
at
só
home.
importar e
We
investir
don't
fora de
want to
casa,
export
né?
and
Então a
invest
gente tem que
outside our
ter
home,
essa
so
claridade,
to
né? O
speak.
Catar traz
So we have
agora
to
para a
understand this.
mesa uma rede mais
Qatar is
forte de
offering a
relações
stronger
internacionais, bem como
network
novas
of
rotas de
international
abastecimento,
relationship, as well as
né?
new
E
routes
produtos e
for supply,
serviços
and also
produzidos
products and
dentro
services
do
that
seu próprio
are
país, né?
developed in our
Então, o
own
Catar como uma
country.
nação mais
So
forte
Qatar as a
fortalece todo
stronger
o Golfo,
nation will
né? É
strengthen
bom
the
para
entire
todos.
Gulf region.
A
So it's good
Dima,
for
então, nossa
everyone.
empresa
So
Development
Dima
Impact
Consult,
Managers and
the
Advisors, a gente quer
development
contribuir para
impact
esse
monitoring
esforço
and advisory, we
regional,
contribute
né?
for this regional
Aproximar as
effort
empresas
to
e as
really bring
instituições
the companies
públicas
and
também
the public
brasileiras, né?
institutions together, as well as the Brazilian
E da América
institutions
Latina, né?
and
A
Latin
esse
American
grande
institutions
pequeno país que é o
to
Catar,
this
né? Então
great
não
small
hesitem
country, which
em
is Qatar.
contactar a
So
gente,
please do
em
not
explorar
hesitate in
maneiras, né,
contacting us
de como
and
estabelecer
exploring
novos
new ways to
parceiros e
establish
parceiras
new
de negócios no
partnerships
Catar, né,
for
fazer
doing business in
investimentos,
Qatar, for
expandir
making
seu negócio
investments, for
e fazer
expanding your business
cooperação,
here in
né? Eu vou ter
Qatar,
o maior
and to
prazer
develop
de responder
cooperation strategies.
perguntas que
It will
vocês
be
possam ter.
my
Muito
pleasure to answer
obrigada.
all of your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Luana. Thank you for your talk. Very good talk, very clear speech. And you were also very optimistic. You were talking about great opportunities that Brazilians have. Of course, you've had experience with exporters and with Brazilian executives. And we had been talking a lot about the World Cup in Brazil. So it is very interesting to hear your speech. Now, lastly, for our conversation, we have the head of our international office, Mr. Rafael Solimeo. Mr. Rafael will give us an overview on market opportunities for the Brazilian food industry in Arab countries. He will be discussing what he has seen, and as Mr. Al-Qasimi said really well, he is our eyes and ears in the Arab world, so he's going to give us a little bit of context on that. You may begin, Mr. Solimeo. Hi, good morning. And by the way, good morning if you are in Brazil, and good afternoon if you are in the Arab world. Fernanda, let me ask you for help. I will be sharing my screen with you. So please let me know if you can see it okay. Yes, we can see your screen. You can go to presentation mode as well. Is it working now? Yes, thank you. I have a brief presentation for you on opportunities in the F&B industry. But first, let me talk about the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. And I do apologize because my voice is not really good today. The Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce has been around for over 68 years, and we want to expand and consolidate collaborations and partnerships to help businesses get closer to opportunities. We are the only Chamber of Commerce that has been acknowledged by the Arab League. We also work with the Union of Arab Chambers. Now, how can we connect Arabs and Brazilians? At the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, we work with social media, we work with PR, and we have our own news agency called ANBA, ENBA. At ENBA, we have news in Arabic, Portuguese, and English. We have members in Brazil and in Arab countries, and we represent all of them. We have trade shows, business rounds, events, talks, and trade missions. Our next trade show is Go Food in February, one of the biggest food trade shows in the Arab world. We also have a market intelligence department and a consultancy department, so we have specialized consultancy services. We also provide our members with the certification of documents. We have sanitation certificates, halal certificates, etc. And if you are here, you are probably listening to our translation either in Portuguese or English, and this is being translated by the people hired by the Arab Chamber. Our headquarters are in São Paulo at the Paulista Avenue. We also have an office in Itajaí in the south of Brazil, and we've now had other offices abroad. This office takes care of all 22 Arab countries. And we want to start an office in Saudi Arabia and another one in Egypt. This is probably going to happen in the first half of 2021. Let me tell you what we do in our international office in Dubai. Our international office basically does what the Brazilian office does. We have business opportunities, services, trade shows, business rounds. In our international office, we have employees who speak Portuguese. They are Brazilian. They speak Arabic. We have Arab employees, and we want to help Brazilians in the Arab countries and Arabs in Brazil. We want to help Brazilians develop their businesses in Arab countries, and we want to shorten the gap between Brazil and Arab countries. We receive our members in our office, and we have office rooms and meeting rooms, and our doors are always open to you. Let me talk about the Arab countries. The Arab world has 22 countries with an 11.27 million square kilometers area. We have the Gulf countries to your right. At the center, we have Levantine countries. And then we have the north of Africa with Egypt and Sudan. And we have everything you see to the left as well. The GDP of Arab countries gets to a total of $2.81 trillion. We have over 60% of international oil reserves. This is a big logistic and seaside hub. Of course, we also have a lot of hotels and a lot of tourism here. We have smart cities as well, and we have a lot of high-tech technology. We have big data, We have 3D printing, we have green buildings. And in this region, we always have concerns about the environment, and we have sustainable buildings, and we work on renewable energy, for example. The Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce has been a part of international sustainability trade shows for a while. We have 428 million people in Arab countries. The Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce carried out a research with H2R Consultancy and IBOP in Brazil. And we have around 12 million Arab descendants in Brazil. This is very interesting to know, especially when we talk about the relationship we hold with Arabs, because we are closer to them than we expect. Let me touch on foreign trade, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on food. Arab countries imported $103.14 billion of food in the world. We had around 3% in decrease compared to 2018. Their biggest suppliers were Brazil, India, and the US. Brazilian exports were $7.83 billion in 2020. Compared to 2019, contrary to the imports in Arab countries, in 2019, we had more exports from Brazil. So in comparison to 2019, actually, in 2020, we had a 2.8% increase in Brazilian exports to the Arab countries. Brazil is one of the biggest suppliers to the Arab world when it comes to food. And Arab countries rank second as the destination of Brazilian exports. Our main products are commodities. We have sugar, poultry, corn, meat or beef, and soybeans. And Arabs import a lot of sugar, wheat, etc., including rice. The 5 biggest Arab countries importing food from the world are Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, then we have Algeria and Iraq, and then we have the other countries. We know that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt have a large population, and they are a large market. And the UAE is one of the biggest importers because, as Mr. Al-Qasimi said, they are a hub to the world. That's why they import so much. The 5 main destinations of Brazilian exports are very similar to the first pie. So we have Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Algeria. We also have Morocco and the UAE, and then we have the remaining countries representing 28%. In the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, we have a market intelligence department. At the end of the year, they did some research and they found the biggest Brazilian products that are exported to the world and the biggest Brazilian products that are exported specifically to Arab countries. They also saw the products that Arab countries import most frequently from the world and from Brazil. So we were trying to match data, and we see Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar. The biggest products sold to Saudi Arabia were rice, chicken, milk, food, preparations, and corn. To Egypt, wheat, soybeans, corn, beef, and vegetables. To the UAE, poultry, nuts, milk, food preparations, and alcohol. We have Kuwait with rice, poultry, milk, wheat, and bakery products. In Qatar, we have poultry, rice, bakery products, and barley. Now, if we think about the main suppliers for Saudi Arabia, we have India, US, Argentina, Turkey, and the Netherlands. For Egypt, Russia, USA, Ukraine, Argentina, and Indonesia. For the UAE, we have India, US, Australia, New Zealand for beef, and France with poultry. For Kuwait, we are competing a lot with India, the US, Australia, Germany, and the Netherlands. And for Qatar, we are usually competing with India, Australia, Turkey, the US, and Iran. So let me talk about specific traits from these markets. We were analyzing their traits, and I would like to share some of that with you. So let me talk about the strengths of this market and why it is advantageous to bring products here. We are talking about an accelerated economic diversification process because of the growing population. We also have growing urbanization in Arab countries, in Egypt with New Cairo, and in Saudi Arabia with other cities, and in the UAE, where we basically have renovations all over the place. We have Qatar getting ready for the World Cup. That is why we expect more urbanization. We also expect more and more tourists for business and leisure. We know that we are a hub or a layover to go to China or Australia, for example, with Emirates. With Qatar, things are going to change with the World Cup. Egypt is also really prepared for that, and they are ready to Europe as well. Our weaknesses are that Arab countries vary a lot in the level of income and economic development. Some countries are wealthier, some countries are poorer. So it is a little bit difficult to understand what products we're taking there and whether we're going to talk to a lower class, an upper class, or a middle class. So it's a little bit difficult to align that. We also see differences in the quality and extension of logistic infrastructure in these countries. And we have malnourishment as something that restricts productivity by local workforce. So maybe food is ranking third and is not a huge priority for a few countries yet. We have opportunities. Food security is the biggest opportunity of all. And this is our topic today. We have high demand in the Arab market and the international market for food and beverages. We have different ethnicities and nationalities. So we have different consumption habits in the Arab countries. So, for example, you may export a specific blend of coffee to the Arab world, and some of its population like it because it's very strong, maybe in the Gulf. Or maybe you could export a lighter coffee for Americans who are here. You could have basmati rice or you could have regular rice. You have different options. You also have a low possibility of expansion for agricultural production as far as land goes, available land. So even though they try to do it here and they may try to do it here more often, they will always need Brazilians to supply them with food. We have a very dry region, some barren lands, so they do need partners like Brazil to export food to them. Some of the challenges are the reducing oil prices in the international market, the decreasing oil prices. We also have internal conflicts which make it harder to have access to food. And we have a growing number of international players in Arab countries. Of course, Brazil is not the only country holding a webinar on food security in Arab worlds because other countries already want to take advantage of this opportunity, and this could be a challenge. Let me talk about the Brazilian image, the image of Brazil in Arab countries. As I said, the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce carried out a survey with H2R Consultancy Services to understand how the Arab population sees us. And we want to understand where we stand with them. Over 70% of Brazilians and Arabs see each other as good trade partners. This is a significant figure. 71% of Arabs have already purchased products from Brazil. 60% of them have bought food, 34% of them have bought textiles, and 15% of them have bought beauty products. So over half of Arabs have already consumed Brazilian products in some way. Now, leaving food and beverages To the side for a bit, we have other products that Arabs think are interesting in Brazil. We have footwear, leather, clothing, beauty products, etc. Well, that's what I wanted to share with you. And I do apologize because Portuguese is not my native language. If you have any questions, if you need any help, please let me know. Send me a message. And this is my email, rsolimeo@ccab.org.br. I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. It was very much important to hear the key figures and opportunities that we may have between Brazil and the Arab countries. You also provided a great summary on the major products the countries work with today. This opens up an opportunity for us to discuss how we can broaden the efforts. It's an important moment to discuss this. Speaking of events, we are going to have Expo 2020. Shortly, we'll have this event, and it precisely addresses the theme of connecting minds and creating the future. So it's very much important to say that. So, how can we better integrate the partnerships with Brazil to go beyond the exporting of food items and products, but actually establish a partnership with a consortium and groups and joint ventures between Brazil and the Arab countries to further use this region, which is a consolidated hub, but we can broaden the opportunities as Luana said, it's a new stage of Qatar. Today, Qatar is a more mature country. So there is the opportunity of establishing companies in Qatar to have this commercial exchange. And the Qatari companies should become international companies that is expanding and enhancing their connectivity. So there's a question here. So as of now, looking into 2021, and it's a question to Mr. Al-Kazemi and to Ms. Ozemela. How do you see the support of the Chamber of Commerce happening so that we can intensify the efforts? Because we have to discuss the opportunities that might emerge. And it goes beyond traditional trading, right? So we have been discussing digitizing and the use of technology, addressing traceability, which is deeply related to the certification methods, the quality and the security of foodstuffs. So as of now, addressing the opportunities that you mentioned and addressing the scenarios that you addressed, how can we take a second step now? In this webinar, we have the partnership of ABIA, and they have many industries as members, not only Brazilian industries and factories, but also international corporations. They participate in the food industry and they have this strong link with Brazil. So it's really a provoking question to you. How can we help you? And that's interesting for us to close this panel. I don't know who would like to start, Mr. Al-Kazemi or Ms. Ozemela, please, you have the floor.
Majid, talvez.
Or perhaps Mr. Al-Kazemi, ladies first, he says.
Natural da região.
So you're
Bom,
natural
eu
from the
posso falar
region.
muito
Well,
rapidamente,
anyhow,
passar a
I
palavra para o
can
Majid.
briefly answer and then I pass
Em
the floor
termos
to
do
Mr.
que pode ser
Al-Kazemi.
feito para facilitar
So
e para
let's discuss
acelerar
what can be done to facilitate
digamos, essa
and to
cooperação
expedite
mais,
the cooperation.
digamos, que resulte
A
em
cooperation that will
investimentos,
result
né,
in
na
more
prática, que
investments in
resultem em
practice.
mais vendas para as
A
empresas
cooperation that
brasileiras
will
e
result in
vendas para
more
as
sales
empresas
for the
do
Brazilian
Catar e do Golfo,
and
né?
the
Ou
Qatari
seja,
and
de
the Gulf companies.
criação de novas tecnologias, colaboração
Perhaps
nisso,
the
né?
creation
Seja
of
de
new
pesquisa,
technologies.
o instituto aqui de
perhaps related
pesquisa do
to
Catar, o
research
QNRF,
projects.
Qatar
We
National
have the
Research Center, que
QNRF, the
financia muitos
Qatari
editais de
Research
pesquisa.
Center
Tem
that
vários
funds
editais de pesquisa
many
no tema de food
bidding
security
processes
que pede
for
para
research.
parear
There are many related to
universidades do
food
Catar com
security,
universidades
and they want to
internacionais, que
bring together
geralmente
Qatari
são
universities
universidades
and international
da Europa,
universities,
dos
and
Estados
these are usually
Unidos, né?
European,
Quando que nós
American
temos
universities.
centros de pesquisa de
But we
primeiro
do
mundo
have
que poderiam
top-notch
estar
research
ganhando
centers there
esses
that
editais. E
could,
por que não
be
ganham?
winning
Porque
the bidding
realmente a
processes. And
informação
why don't
não
they win the
chega
bidding
no Brasil,
processes? Because the
né?
information doesn't
E
go to
muitas
Brazil.
vezes existe esse
The information is
mismatch,
not
né? E a gente
disseminated in Brazil,
precisa
and there is a
de
sort of mismatch.
instituições
So we
como
do
a
need
Câmara, como
institutions
a
like
ABIA,
the Arab
como
Brazilian
até
Chamber
mesmo,
of
né,
Commerce, or ABIA,
a
which is the Brazilian
parte
Association of the Food
diplomática do governo
Industry, and we
brasileiro
need Brazilian
para
diplomatic
estabelecer
efforts
essas
as well
alianças
to
iniciais, né,
establish the
estabelecer e
early
dizer, olha, existe
alliances,
canal aberto,
to
para
really
depois
show the
empresas
communication
como
channels
nós,
and open
né,
them up
Magid,
so
que é a
that
empresa de consultoria também,
companies
a minha
like
que é a empresa
us,
de consultoria para
we are a consulting
favorecer
company,
essa
for
relação,
example, and
aí
we
sim
want
a
to
gente possa
foster
trabalhar
this
numa
kind of
agenda,
relationship so that we
porque
can really
realmente
work on a
aqui,
specific
falando do
agenda.
Catar,
And speaking
primeiro
of
precisa
Qatar,
existir consenso
first, there
de
must
pares, o
be
Qatar
a
Investment
consensus.
Authority
For example,
com,
Qatari
né, uma
Investment
instituição de
Authority
linha do
establishing
governo
relationships
estabelecida,
with a
que
Brazilian
tem que
government
fazer
institution,
parceria em
so they will
ponto
establish
específico. E depois esse
specific
trickle-down, o
partnerships.
comitê executivo que
And then we
vai
have to
aí
create the
implementar isso,
executive committee that
precisa
will
ter
implement such
comitê
partnership.
aqui,
So there must
né,
be a committee here
profissionais
on our side
expertos
with the
aqui no
expert
Catar, e precisa
professionals
ter no
here at
Brasil
Qatar, and there
fazendo o
must be
trabalho,
such
né?
committee
A
in
gente
Brazil developing
escuta
this kind
muito
of
lá a
work.
assinatura ano
So
retrasado, né?
the year
Uma
before the
visita
last,
presidencial e
there
assinaturas
was
de
this
vários MOUs.
presidential
E eu
visit,
sempre
and there
digo, a
was the
gente tem que
signature
sair
of
do
many
MOU e ir para o
MOUs. We have to go
MODO,
from the
né? Isso que
memorandum of
precisa acontecer.
understanding and go to the
E
memorandum
isso
of
não tem
doing.
acontecido. Então, a
This
gente
has to
precisa
happen, and it
realmente
hasn't happened.
estabelecer
So we really
as
need to
alianças
establish
diplomáticas
diplomatic
claras.
alliances that
Depois a gente
are
precisa baixar para
clear-cut,
o tema
and
de
then we need to
execução
really
na prática,
address the
né?
execution, the putting into
E ter a
practice.
proximidade.
And then
Então,
we
e
need to
algo que
establish
também
a
foi
close
falado
relationship.
anteriormente,
And
de
something
ter
else that was mentioned
escritórios
before, there
regionais,
must be
facilitando isso, é
regional
extremamente
offices
necessário, principalmente
facilitating
no
all this effort.
pós-pandemia.
This is
Então,
extremely
esses são
necessary,
alguns
especially in the
pontos, talvez, que eu
post-pandemic
gostaria de
period.
colocar nesse
So this is
sentido.
what I had to say. Thank you. Thank you, Luana. Mr. Arkazemi?
Thank you, Luana. We seem to be thinking along the same lines. I wanted to sort of raise that to a regional level and really talk about the two entities here that are really brought us all together. When we're talking about what the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce has is they have a perspective in the market here. They understand and are speaking to all the countries where their offices are. While ABIA is sitting there looking at all of its constituents as companies. So what you really need is, as Luana said, these two committees, but they need to meet. And maybe the Brazilian Chamber, Arab Brazilian Chamber comes and says, these are the challenges in the market and these are the opportunities. And ABIA goes, these are the people that can deliver those solutions. And then together, that's how you're going to bridge this, right? That is the journey that is expected, where if you have, you know, Rafael sitting here and he understands, well, you know, in UAE, we're looking for X, or in Qatar, we're looking for Y, or actually Egypt needs this. And he has a list of challenges to bring to this joint committee, then ABIA can come and say, okay, we have a research center as part of one of our members that can do this. We would recommend you go and speak to that university to do that. These are the people that can build a consortium to solve this. And essentially, you're bringing problem and solution together. And then if that is a regular meeting and you can bring in the beginning the context, you know, this is what we see as challenges, this is what we have as solutions, and then bring the players and have them execute joint ventures based on those MOUs, then you're off to the races. That's really super opportunity. But I think what needs to happen is, as we were discussing here, the chamber needs to curate a list of challenges and opportunities in the market. And then these need to be addressed by ABIA to say, okay, which of these can we deal with? Which of these are we, you know, have a candidate to execute on? that's how you're really going to get that very accelerated, solution-driven opportunity. It's as simple as that.
Well, there's a question to Mr. Solimeo. So how do you see the Chamber of Commerce supporting the Brazilian exports so that we no longer work with just commodities, because they are the majority today, so that we can work with value-added products? So with the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, how can we support you in your operations? Thank you for the question, Ms. Baltazar. I believe that the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, with our local office here, we can be the eyes and the ears of Brazilians. We can also represent Brazilians vis-a-vis the local population here, and really show the Brazilian brand, showing that Brazil is much more than just commodities. We do have many Brazilian products, high quality products that offer value added. Even with last year's crisis and with the pandemic, we were able to disseminate the Brazilian brands here in the museum. So we took the coffee museum in the UAE, and every day we presented a Brazilian brand to really show to the population that the coffee they drink in their homes is Brazilian coffee. And if they buy Brazilian coffee with the Brazilian origin, not just the blend, it is as good as. So, and also participation in trade shows, the research projects, the studies on the trends. We have to do all of that to add value to the Brazilian products. Thank you, Mr. Solimel. Yeah, there's much to be done. And I think this question is to Mr. Al-Kazimi. So Mr. Al-Kazimi, in regards to regulatory affairs, this is widely questioned here in Brazil and for exports as a whole. So what are the challenges and the opportunities that you see that have to be tackled so that we can further advance in 2021 and further years?
Thank you, Fernanda. So what you have to understand is, as a group of countries, you're dealing with a lot of different legislation. And as such, even within countries or regions, there's a real strata or a level of this regulation that sometimes isn't as clear as one would like. Really, the ability for the offices here to be able to make that clear crystal for the clients, for the members, to be able to move in and really shorten the time to execution. So the challenge can be that you come into a country and you're literally spend a lot of time finding your feet to get started. So what is possible is not only from the office, but also with the facilitation of offices like Luana and ourselves, to understand where you essentially have to have the foresight. What are you trying to do in terms of the regulatory requirements to be able to get started before you even put a foot on the ground? And these offices here are probably the best way to communicate into with Rafael's team across the Arab world, to say, okay, we're looking at this opportunity now, but what's the regulatory requirement? And to be able to lay this out and say, okay, we have these steps to do. Now, the challenge can sometimes be that between a federal and a local system, it's not clear to the outside world, where different governing bodies, and this is different levels of maturity across the Arab world, where at the federal level, country to country, it might be clear, but within country, there are certain authorities or agencies that have requirements. This is simply about making sure that there's a proper study done before actioning. But once you have that, it's straight sailing. And I think the importance is being a bit more proactive about this. It will end up saving you on time, costs, and ultimately get you faster to execution on the ground or trading.
Perfect. Thank you. And to close, and discussing what Mr. Solimeo mentioned and what the ABCC has been doing to expand the number of products that are exported. So I have a question to both Al-Kazemi and Ms. Ozamela. With the opening of the borders that we had recently, do you envisage any joint work with Brazil to increase the number of exports from Brazil? So how do you see that happening in the forthcoming years for us to work on here at the Chamber of Commerce? So Mr. Al-Kazemi, you may begin, and then Ms. Ozamela will close. So on to you.
So I believe we've got a real vast amount of opportunity, and it really comes to understanding how many companies and how many opportunities exist in Brazil that we have not been exposed to yet. I hate to say it, but I think what most people understand about Brazil here in the Arab world is both the coffee and the acai. And I think we could go a bit further, get the pão de queijo in here, and really look at the varied tastes that Brazil has to offer. It's about bringing Brazil into the region and really exposing the many facets that Brazil has in F&B, not to just go to the basic commodities that we already know and love and trust, but really, expose opportunities. As said, we have World Cup. We also have Expo. Everybody knows the Brazilian football team is going to make an incredible appearance. And ultimately, we really hope that Brazil's presence at the Expo will also cross those bridges and be able to give more of the consumer end that experience. Ultimately, I think it all sits in education and awareness. And as much as we can have Brazilian experiences, people on the ground connecting, that will start to accumulate. And notwithstanding the challenges of Corona, I think we still have a very bright year ahead of us, and those opportunities are going to come through. And so long as we have the Chamber and ABIA in close connection, I think it's going to be very clear where companies are going to start coming up and really being the solution providers to challenges in the region. And look forward to facilitating any of that from our end as well.
So thank you now, Ms.
Muito
Ozamela.
rapidamente, ou seja,
So
o
quite briefly
potencial
now,
é gigantesco, né?
it's a gigantic
Queria remeter
potential,
todo
isn't it?
mundo, se pudessem ler uma publicação do
Well,
Banco
if you could read
Interamericano já há
the
uns 2 anos
publication of
atrás,
the
sobre
Inter-American
o
Bank of
potencial
Development about 2 years ago
subutilizado
about the
da balança
underused
comercial
potential
entre
of
América
the
Latina, e
trade
depois eles
balance between
desagregam o
Latin
Brasil,
America and
os
our
países
region,
do Golfo
and
eles também
they
desagregam,
disaggregate
né? Ou
Brazil
seja,
and the
só
Gulf countries.
1% eles
So
calculam do
they
potencial
calculate that
desse
just
comércio
1%
é o que está
of
sendo
the
utilizado, né?
potential
Então
of
tem
trade is
muito
tapped
ainda
into.
para crescer,
So there's
né?
much to be expanded.
E uma coisa que é importante a gente notar é esse
Something
conceito dos
important that is
produtos
worth
complementários, né?
noting
Que
is the
são
concept of
complementares. E o que
supplementary
significa isso?
products. What does
Significa
that mean?
produtos
Well, it
descobrir,
means
né?
that
Aqueles
we have to
produtos
discover
que o
the
Brasil, por
products
exemplo, está exportando
that
e está
Brazil is
comprando,
exporting and
né?
that Brazil
De
is
outros países que
purchasing
não do
as well
Golfo, mas que
from other
poderia estar
countries
comprando
other
mais
than the Gulf
barato,
countries,
né?
but
Ou
it could be
exportando a
buying from the
valor
Gulf
até
at a
mais
lower price
competitivo para o
or
Golfo. E
exporting at
não
a higher
está,
price to the
né?
Gulf
E tentar
countries. And
descobrir quais são
Brazil is
esses
not
produtos,
doing
até
that.
no
So we have
relatório
to
até
find out
menciona
what the
alguns
products
deles,
are,
né?
and the
Mas
report does
a gente
mention
tentar,
some
ou
of these
seja, fazer um
products.
trabalho um pouco mais
So we
técnico,
have to do a more technical work,
para
I would say.
apoiar, para ser, ou seja, eu gosto muito dessa palavra
And I
proativos.
really like this word,
Proativos em aí
proactive.
sim
We have to be
identificar, olha, nós
proactive
identificamos essa
to
lista
identify.
de
Let's say we
produtos que
identify
são
a list
complementares,
of
né? E a
products that are
Câmara
supplementary
facilitar
products,
nessa
and the Chamber of
relação,
Commerce
né?
would
Aí no Brasil,
facilitate
a gente
this
recebe
relationship with the Brazilian companies.
muitas solicitações de
So
quero
we do get
exportar
many
açúcar para o
requests. For
Catar, que não
example, I
vem pela
want to
Câmara.
export
Isso só
sugar
são
to
perda de
Qatar.
tempo.
And these
Realmente a
requests are
gente não
not,
sabe quem é a pessoa,
put
depois não
forward
responde,
through
depois,
the
ou
Chamber of
seja, é
Commerce. And
muito
this is just a waste of
doloroso o
time.
tema de comércio.
So it's quite
principalmente quando
painful
é
to deal
feito
with the
assim, sem
trade
um parceiro como
topics,
a Câmara, por exemplo.
especially when
A
it's done
Câmara
without a
vetar
partner
e
like
fazer a
the
diligência
ABCC.
nos
So
agentes de
the Chamber
exportação,
of
nas empresas que
Commerce
querem
can develop
exportar,
due
e a gente
diligence
poder
in the companies that are willing
estabelecer
to export
um
and in the
vínculo
exporting
direto da
agents. So
empresa
we are able
com
to
o
establish a
comprador,
direct
esse é o
connection
melhor
between
caso
the
de
company
sucesso
and the
para os
buyers.
dois
That's a true
pares,
success
né?
case for both
E eu acho
sides.
que isso é um valor de altíssimo valor,
And
assim,
I
de
think
altíssimo
this
valor,
brings high
algo
value
um
to the
serviço, né, que
table.
poderia agregar muito,
It's truly a
poderia
service
evitar
that
muitas
truly adds value.
arbitragens, né?
It
Ou
can
seja,
avoid
que existem,
arbitration processes, for
e a
example, that
gente
do take
poderia
place.
ter aí uma balança comercial
And then we
entre as
would
duas
have
regiões muito mais favorável.
a more favorable
Então, ou
trade
seja, nos
balance between the
colocamos
two
à
regions.
disposição para
So we are
isso.
here available at your
Preciso lembrar que
service.
também existe um diretório
I need to
de
remind you that
empresas
there is a
exportadoras do Catar,
directory of
né?
exporting
Para
companies
o mundo.
from
Então,
Qatar
também essa lista
to
já
the
está
world.
vetada. Existe
So
quem
this
cria essa
list
lista, é
has
o
been
Qatar
approved.
Development Bank.
So the
Então,
Qatar
empresas
Development Bank
brasileiras que
creates
queiram
that list.
comprar algo,
So
né,
Brazilian
poderiam
companies
ir
that
nesta
purchase
lista.
from these companies,
E
they
ela já
can
está
resort to this
setorializada, etc. A gente pode
directory,
compartilhar
and
também
it's
e tudo
divided by
mais.
sector,
Então,
and
ou
we can
seja,
share this
existem
list with
essa
you.
informação, essa
So this
curadoria
information, this
de empresas, né,
curatorship
é
work
muito
of the companies
importante.
that are
E eu
listed is
acredito
highly
que, assim, eu
important
tenho
as well.
certeza que a Câmara continuando esse
And I'm sure
trabalho vai
that
só,
the Arab Brazilian
tende só
Chamber
a
of
melhorar.
Commerce
Né?
will further
Obrigada.
improve its performance, which is already great. Thank you so much. So thank you all. This is the end of the webinar. I would like to thank Mr. Al-Kazimi and Ms. Ozemela and Mr. Solimeo for the discussion panel. I would like to thank Ms. Parenti and Mr. Sabonado, who is here representing Ms. Parenti. I think it was a quite rich discussion. Food security, well, it's a vast topic. There are many agendas to be worked on, I would say. And especially now in 2021, there's much to be done. We have a great deal to contribute addressing the different regions. I wish you all a prosperous year. I hope this is the first of many discussion panels that we are going to hold together encompassing the Arab countries. And before closing, I would like to pass the floor to the president of the ABCC, Mr. Hanum, for the final closure.
Thank you, Ms. Baltazar. And I would like to thank everyone. Before we wrap up, let me tell you that I was really happy with this webinar. I think it was really straightforward, and we talked about many opportunities and many possibilities. So thank you for being so objective and so clear. I am very happy to see that, but I also acknowledge that our responsibility at the chamber grows by the leaps. I think you've given us a lot of homework, and it's very important homework. But you also talked about alliances, about research, about know how, about innovation, synergies, digitization, swiftness, being proactive not only in halal but other areas as well. You talked about brands, you talked about Latin America, you talked about so many topics. So please stay tuned to our social media channels because during the next weeks, we will be disclosing our agenda for 2021 and we will surely be approaching many of these topics. We had the Brazil Arab Countries Economic Forum being held by the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in October. During the forum, we released and launched many projects, and we are now going to start implementing some of them. Many of them are aligned with these opportunities. I do believe we can be curators to the relationship between Brazil and Arab countries, as you've said. We are already working a lot on alliances and planning. In strategic planning, we are now putting things together for agribusiness between Brazil and Arab countries. The Brazilian Ministry of Agriculture is a part of it. The Union of Arab Chambers is a part of it. And of course, the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce is a part of it. Our foundation is studies that we are now carrying out with an agricultural college in São Paulo, ISALC. They can also be potential partners for studies with Arab countries in potential collaboration with Arab universities. This is something that you've mentioned. So we already have some of these studies to use them as the foundation for our strategic planning in order to foster an even stronger strategic relationship. We also need to remember Embrapa. Embrapa is the Brazilian Agriculture and Livestock Research Institute, and they already have a lot of know how, so we may take advantage of that. You've also said that businesses are never successful on their own, and I agree. So in 2020, upon hearing our members and upon hearing Arab countries, we created a trade fostering committee. And in this committee, we frequently discuss the food industry. We are trying to develop new suppliers who will be able to cater to the needs of Arab countries. And as you said, we should work as a group, not as individual members, and we should understand what Arab countries need. We need to figure out what they need and what this kind of collaboration can achieve, because it is not only about what Arab countries need, it is about what Brazil needs and wants as well. You've been talking about how we complement each other. So we have a lot to give to Arab countries and we have a lot to get from them. We can think not only about know how and innovation, as you said, but also hardware and logistics. And whenever we talk about safety and security, we need to know what Arabs want to buy. Digitization is changing everything, and we are now launching the Ellis portal, a portal to foster the relationship between Brazilians and Arabs. We are also implementing a blockchain platform to ensure we have safety and speed. Speaking of safety, in October, we launched the Halal project. The goal of the Halal project is to make sure Arab consumers feel safe and have guarantees when they purchase a product from Brazil, because we will have full traceability from its origin. So, from the point of production to the end point. And this is also going to strengthen Brazil as a brand. We were also talking about Latin America. At the chamber right now, we are trying to figure out how to create more synergy between the Latin American countries so that we as a group can be more proactive and can create advantages for Arab countries, for Brazil, and for Latin America. We may have a Latin American Council to work with Arab countries as the Latin American bloc. And finally, I would like to remind you and to highlight that we truly believe in the need of being present in these countries. The Dubai office is doing great work, but this work is going to be even better when we have our office in Riyadh, in Cairo, because each office will be able to be dedicated to a smaller number of countries, and we will get synergy between these offices as well. When we look at these offices, we see the potential of using Arab countries as hubs. Well, we have a lot of homework to do, and we are doing it. We have definitely added a few more items to our homework based on your remarks today. And please count on us. The Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce is here for you. We want to do this extremely important work you have mentioned. I know I've been talking a lot, but finally, I would like to thank Mr. Al Qasimi, who I would like to call a friend since we have met in person a few times in our office in Dubai, and he needs to come visit us in Brazil as soon as we don't have any travel restrictions any longer. And maybe Miss Osamela could join us too, and we would hold a in-person meeting. Thank you to Miss Osamela as well. Thank you for your brilliant talk and the overview you have brought to us. I would also like to thank Mr. Rafael Solimeo, our biggest representative in Arab countries. I would like to thank Ms. Baltazar for being a great moderator, and I would like to thank Ms. Graziella. Thank you to Mr. Sabonaro as well for being here representing ABIA for the end of the webinar. And we have a number of Arab ambassadors here, and it is important to highlight that because they are interested in this topic. We have the Dean of the Council of Arab Ambassadors, who is also the ambassador to Palestine, and the ambassador of the Arab League in Brazil, the ambassador of Bahrain in Brazil, Qatar, Egypt, the UAE. We have the UAE consul in Sao Paulo. We have the ambassador of Kuwait, etc. So thanks to all of them. I would like to thank everyone at the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, our employees, our members, and our non-members as well. But please, if you're not a member, remember that by being a member, you can deepen your relationships with the Arab countries. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to all of you. Take care and let's get the vaccine. Enjoy your day.